Now, the police have been accused of institutionalised racism before. Now they're being accused of institutionalised sexism, particularly when it comes to handling reports of domestic abuse carried out by their own officers. Nearly 100 more women have come forward since a super complaint about this was lodged by the Centre for Women's Justice, a charity campaigning to end violence against women, in March last year. A significant number of those are police women themselves in relationships with other officers. Our reporter Melanie Abbott has been looking at this. Melanie, first of all, what is a super complaint?
Yeah, these super complaints, they actually began in the financial sector and they were only introduced for policing in November 2018. And the idea is that a super complaint looks at systemic problems where a policy may need changing. And they can only be brought by designated organisations. You and I can whack one in, for instance.
And in terms of this particular super complaint, then, what is it looking at? What's it been trying to achieve?
Yeah, it involves a number of, let's call them specimen cases, if you like, 19 of them, where complaints of domestic abuse by police officers, it's claimed, weren't properly dealt with by the police force these men were employed by. And these complaints, they covered 15 different police forces. So it's not just a few failing. And the report talks about, as you said, a locker room culture of institutionalized sexism in the police, which in turn condones and trivializes violence against women, it's claimed. And it identifies 11 common themes. And these range from difficulties in reporting the abuse to failures in investigating it to abused women ending up being arrested. Now, the College of Policing is leading on handling this complaint, but it also involves Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and the Independent Office for Police Conduct, the IOPC. Now, these three bodies are working together. They have been for almost 14 months now. The College of Policing told me it's taking so long as these points cover significant and complex matters. And the college says it's ensuring the process is as thorough as possible. I was told the investigation should be complete by the end of this year.
Thanks, Mel, for putting us in the picture there. Well, one of those awaiting the outcome is Amy, whose case was included in the original super complaint. It's not her real name for obvious reasons. And I should also say she's not a police officer as well, like some of the other women that we were mentioning, but she has agreed to talk to us. Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for being with us today. I thought we could start by hearing about what happened with your police officer husband, because I know things got particularly bad when you were pregnant.
Yes, so I would say that the warning signs were probably there before he joined the police force. So he would throw things around, he'd call me names, track me places on my phone. He'd throw my clothes out if he didn't like them. I put it down to sort of immaturity, but I fell pregnant and he joined the police force in the same month. And that's when things really escalated from there.
What happened and after the baby was born?
I had quite a difficult birth. I ended up spending a week in hospital with an infection, and he used the time that I was in hospital to sell my car and use the £3,000 deposit for his own car. He sort of made it out to be something he'd done to help us. You know, we've got a baby, so now we need a bigger car. He didn't want me to go back to work, which caused me to feel even more sort of trapped. He would always threaten me, you know, I'm a police officer, I can do what I want. But once I had the baby, he had something new to threaten me with, which was my child. So if you don't do what I want, I can have it taken away. I can tell people you're crazy. I can take her, no one will, you know, you'll never see her again. I'm a police officer. Nobody's going to believe you. So, you know, I was a new mum. I had no family close by because by this point he'd moved us to a house that was sort of 3 hours away from any of my family. I just felt I was completely trapped and my mental health just massively started to deteriorate.
It sounds incredibly difficult to cope with, especially at that time of your life, becoming a new mother. But I suppose what the theme seems to be in some of what you're saying there is that he was using his authority as a police officer.
Yes, definitely.
And did that make you feel, you know, of course, we know that so many people can't come forward when in this situation for lots of reasons, not least you're meant to be, you know, in a relationship with someone and trust them and love them. And it's so hard to speak out and the fear factor as well. But did that add a layer of it seemed impossible to get out of this, to talk to anyone?
Yes, Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, he would never sort of let me attend appointments by myself, so there was never an opportunity to tell anybody what was happening at home. There was a few instances where, if I didn't come home at a particular time, he'd lock the house and I would have to sleep in the garage. So I can remember being about 8 months pregnant and like making a bed out of sort of dust sheets and curtains so I could sleep in the garage at night. There was just, he just kept saying, no one's going to believe you. I can do what I want.
And at one point you found out that he was overdosing you.
Yes, that's right. So I started showing some quite obvious signs of mental health difficulties. I've been to my GP and given antidepressants and something to help me sleep, but he would always attend those appointments with me. So there was never an opportunity to say what was happening. I could only sort of express the way that I was feeling at the time. Because I had a new baby, I was referred to social services and they put him in charge of my medication. And I went for a blood test, which showed that I had really high levels of this particular medication in my system. So there was a meeting with social services where basically they said, are you trying to overdose yourself? Why have you got this huge level of drugs in your system, prescribed drugs? And I'd said, I'm taking them as he's given them to me. He gives me the 8 a day. And then if I get upset at nighttime, he gives me the other 4. And it turned out I was supposed to take 2, not 12. And he said he'd made a mistake. He hadn't understood the instructions properly. And it was probably because, he was so stressed trying to look after me, and social services were so empathetic with him. And, you must be exhausted trying to look after your wife. And would you like a referral to a support group? And would you like counselling? And it just set off no alarm bells whatsoever. And then when we left in the car on the way home, he said to me, well, I'll have to think of something else to keep you quiet now then, won't I? Because obviously he knew exactly what he'd been doing.
So he was the one that was offered support after that?
Yes.
What was it for you that made you split, that made you come away from this?
I got to the point where I was suicidal with what was happening. So there was an incident where he tied me, he actually handcuffed me to the banister of our house and he left me there all night when he went on night shift. And I can't actually remember what it was that I'd done wrong, but I can just remember that our daughter was crying in her cot and she could see me on the banister, but I couldn't get to her because I was tied up, and she spent most of the night crying and wanting her mum, because as a 6-month baby you want a bottle and you want your mum's comfort, and she could see me and I couldn't get to her. People have wonderful memories of the first time their child walked and the first time their child laughed, and the first time my daughter pulled herself up to standing was that night, because she was desperate for her mum and I couldn't get to her. It felt torturous, and I did become suicidal, and I was pulled off the bridge by the police, who turned out to be his colleagues. I told them what was happening. I begged them not to take me back. I thought maybe, surely you've got to take me to a place of safety now. Maybe I'm going to get some help. And then they realised who my husband was. And they put me in the police car and they drove me home to him. And they told him what had happened. And I can remember him shaking their hands and saying, oh, it's all right. Cheers for that, lads. I'll sort her out from here. And that was it. There was no onward referral. There was no support. And of course, he was furious because now I'd shown him up in front of his colleagues. Now I'd embarrassed him. So then the abuse got worse again. And eventually I did think, I have to get out of this. I can't cope with this anymore. I have to leave.
You went to the Independent Police Complaints Commission as well, and within this process, I mean, I know a lot has happened. Tell us about that, and is that because you just felt you couldn't go to the police around you?
Well, I did go to the police. I went to a station and I told them what was happening and that I wanted it to stop, because by this point he was turning up in the night and pressuring me for sex, and there was a lot of sexual abuse started. I was crying when I went to the police station, and the officer left the room to get some tissues, but I could hear him on the radio in the next room talking to someone, I think it was a sergeant, and he was saying, I don't think she smells a drink, but I'll get a bit closer and smell, and I'll ask her about drugs. And then there was a discussion he had about how they were going to find out who my GP was to ask if I had the mental capacity to be making these accusations. And I'm sat there in the next room hearing all this thinking, you haven't even taken my statement yet. You haven't asked me any questions. My husband was right. You don't believe me. So the following day, officers came from the rape unit. They were involved by then. They made it very clear to me that if I wanted to prosecute, I'd have to go to court. I'd have to go to court against a police officer, that he could lose his job. How are you going to pay for your child if your husband's unemployed and he can't pay child maintenance? I said I didn't want to prosecute. I just wanted it to stop. And they said, we'll take a statement and we'll deal with it internally and someone will get back to you. But nobody ever did get back to me.
And then what happened?
So I had a book of evidence because I was keeping a note of dates and times and witnesses to certain things. And about a fortnight after I did the team, I contacted them and said, I haven't heard from you. And I've just realised all this evidence is still sat here. You haven't looked at it. You haven't asked for it. You want this evidence? You know, you said you wanted it. So they said, OK, we'll send someone out. So 2 colleagues came out from the station where my husband worked. They turned up in riot vans, which I felt was quite intimidating, to take this evidence away. That evidence was taken to the station where my husband worked, and parts of it were never seen again. The statement that I'd made no longer exists. It wasn't scanned onto a computer anywhere. The paper copy went missing from the warehouse where the records are kept. So all the evidence was gone. And now, of course, I'd reported it and he got away with it. So that seemed to give him even more confidence that he could do what he wanted. I changed the locks on the house, for example, because he was turning up in the night. And so he just broke in. So I called 999 and said, he's breaking into the house. The back doors are the glass was smashing. Please, can you come and help me? And they said, it's a civil matter and we're not going to come. Then he started setting up direct debits in my name. So I was paying his bills. Debt collectors were turning up saying, you owe us thousands of pounds for this loan that you've taken out. I haven't taken out a loan. So that was the point where I went to the IPCC and they unfortunately didn't do anything. If you have an issue with the police force, in the majority of cases, the IPCC refer that complaint back to the police force so that they can investigate themselves, which doesn't make any sense.
And this leads us to the super complaint. I am going to bring a solicitor in from the Centre for Women's Justice in just a moment, but do you have faith in this super complaint making a change to the police, having gone through this?
I have no confidence in the police now whatsoever. So I sleep with a hammer under my bed because I don't think if I'm burgled in the night, the police will come to help me. My ex-husband and his colleagues, they all still work in the local area. So for me, I feel like it's actually dangerous for me to ever ring 999 because if they attend, I'm putting myself at risk. I hope that things will change. You know, that the police have to accept that there are officers who are not working just to serve and protect. I'm not saying that they're all bad, but people of a certain abusive personality type are attracted to positions of authority, like the police, like the doctors. You know, we've all heard about Harold Chipman, or teachers, clergymen. I
suppose the point to stress is they are a minority, although, as our listeners will hear and you will hear in a moment from a former chief constable, she believes it's a significant minority. But, you know, the point is an important one about who's drawn to the police and how, crucially, the police police the police.